Hello and welcome back to another episode of Come Over for Dinner. I'm so excited you're joining me today. Today I have my daughter-in-law, Serena Hawthorne, on with me. Welcome, Serena.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
I think she did my very first episode where she talked about
meatballs and cream sauce.
Still one of our family favorites.
Yes, and I still have, well, not still, but I, again, have meatballs in my freezer. Got to keep them on hand. It's a staple.
Speaking of the freezer, today's topic is freezer meals. We are deviating from our typical format and talking all about freezer meals. She is married to my second son, and they have two of the cutest little kids that ever were.
They're so precious.
Every grandma is probably apt to say, but mine are the cutest. She has a little girl who's 2. Her name is Joy, and Atticus is
10 months.
10 months.
About to be 11 months.
I knew he's not quite at his first year birthday, but we're getting close. So she is feeding a family of 4. My son eats quite a bit of food, and those kids are having growth spurts right and left. So we're going to really delve into freezer meals today. So we're going to talk a little bit about why freezer meals would be a good option to think about. Serena, why would you potentially have things in your freezer on a day-to-day basis?
I started doing this when I was pregnant with my first because I was afraid of getting postpartum and just not having anything ready, but also not having energy or time to. So that is something I have kept up throughout the years. My oldest is 2. So the 2 years, I really have found that it helps me in the future, my future self. Whenever I don't feel like cooking, I will sometimes get to the end of the day. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to prepare something, and I can just go in the freezer and pull stuff out. So that's super nice having something ready made in case, circumstances come up where I'm not prepared. And then other times I like to use it is on the go if we're going on trips or my husband's going to work or we have a busy morning, especially with breakfast items. Just grab something so I can warm it up before we leave, or, if he's at work, Tim can just put it in the microwave. So I especially like that for, again, not being prepared.
Or when you're just short on time.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of times you are prepared. You just are short on time and you need something quick instead of trying to drive through a drive-through.
Or grab cereal. Yes. Sometimes you feel like you need a little more energy for the day than a bowl of cereal can carry you through.
If you have an upcoming trip and you have lots of hungry kids, if you start freezing things ahead of time, it can be such a fun thing to have some of your favorite foods on vacation. If you're driving, obviously you couldn't do this if you're flying, but we have done that when we took all of the kids before they all started flying the nest. We went to Florida, we drove, and so we took coolers, and I had frozen dinners and muffins and snacks, things like granola and who even knows what, a whole list of things. And it was so nice because we could pull things out anytime we needed a dinner or a snack or a breakfast, and then just go out when we wanted to, when we felt like it. But otherwise, I wasn't having to grocery shop and cook and clean where we were. I could just put something in the oven or the microwave, and it was really instant food, but I was
like
not
a home-cooked meal.
Yes, we were not driving 7 people through a drive-through.
And I remember on camping trips, your family, and I don't even think you were on the camping trip I'm thinking specifically of, but your family would be eating spaghetti and meatballs and a pan roast. I'm like, what? You can't make that with just a campfire? Hey, you had prepared for them, and
Pre-prep.
Everyone was jealous. I will forever remember that.
Frozen something and partially defrosted it to send with them to heat over a camp stove.
Yeah.
So that's another reason you would freeze. And then also just for people in need.
I have often taken it whenever I hear someone's loved one or someone in the church is sick or someone's having a baby. I've taken stuff to the hospital whenever someone's sick, or even for funerals, I've had stuff just ready for that. And if I have a new neighbor, I have lots of go-tos for that. And it doesn't have to be something big. It can always just be, something like a quiche or, something it doesn't have to be a huge expense as well. Because I know that's a big thing, that can be not everyone can just take a whole meal to a new family, especially when you have big families. But yeah, we've got a couple options that we'll talk about that are more cost efficient.
Yes, yes. And there are times when you do want to take a hot, fresh meal, but there are times for whatever the limitation is. For me, currently, I do work full-time teaching. And a lot of times when a meal train goes out, I'm teaching all day long and trying to come home that night and cook something and have it ready and hot and fresh in order to get it there at dinner time. Well, their dinner may be really late, especially if they request it early because they have small children. And so if I do a meal train, I sometimes try to pick a weekend or something like that. You can always do it with a friend potentially. Maybe 2 people do it together. But it's really a fun thing to have something in the freezer that you could either defrost and take hot or just give it to them to put in their oven ahead of time. Sometimes I don't even sign up for the meal train. I just give them a freezer meal for later or send something. And we'll go into specific ideas later. But I remember one time at a church, there was a mom who'd had a baby, and for whatever reason, I missed signing up, or maybe that was full. So I just brought to church one Sunday, pretty soon after they'd had the baby. I brought a bag of frozen breakfast burritos and a bag of frozen muffins, chocolate chip muffins. She made more comments about that I think I've ever received.
Probably anyone else on the meal train.
She had smaller kids, I think a couple of small boys, and at the time, maybe this was their 3rd little boy. And, that kind of thing is like you could heat it up anytime, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, snack, and just to have something to pull out when you don't have anything else.
And breakfast time is a big one for especially having little kids. It's like you wake up, they're up at, the crack of dawn. It's like, oh, I don't want to just go cook something. And I also don't want to, just give them the same thing every day or whatever.
Yeah.
And hey, you've got breakfast burritos and muffins. And you didn't have to spend any time in the kitchen. It's a blessing to others and yourself at times.
And meal trains are dinner. And so if you can't do that or don't have the time, grabbing a breakfast item out of the freezer is a fabulous option. So we'll go into some really great ideas for all the meals and beyond. And I know all my listeners immediately have ideas in their mind too. So you should really go on the blog or on Instagram and post your favorite things, favorite ideas to freeze. So Serena, first of all, let's talk about breakfast. What are some of your favorite breakfast items to freeze?
Well, we've already mentioned a couple. So breakfast burritos are my favorite personally because they're not quite as sweet as everything else. I wake up hungry, so I need like some protein. I can't just have empty carbs coming in me because I'll be hungry in another hour. So breakfast burritos, I use your recipe. I think all of these are Hawthorne recipes.
She has definitely made them her own, though. She is an amazing
Maybe a
cook.
little bit.
I get tips from Serena.
Well, I have used a hack that you've told me about, and it's the raw flour tortillas that are really easy to cook. You just, I think, cook them on the pan for 30 seconds on each side, and I will prep up a stack of those. They reheat a lot better than, in my opinion, than the regular ones because they're not chewy, especially when you add eggs and cheese. Then it can get the texture can be kind of weird, but with these, I have no texture problems, and I will kind of do an assembly line. So I'll have the tortillas, I'll mix together my egg and cheese, and I do sausage mixed in with that as well. I think you can do bacon, you can do bell peppers, onions, and the not the secret ingredient, but the special ingredient is hash browns. And so I've made some without hash browns before, but the Crispy Crown, I think they're circles. I can't.
They are by Ore-Ida.
Ore-Ida, yes. That is that's a fan favorite because it's a little greasy and just adds.
They're crunchy, and so it
adds texture and flavor.
Gives some texture to the burritos. Although I also have tried recently Ore-Ida's diced hash browns that come with peppers and onions. Did you mention that one?
I did not. But I typically don't feel like chopping up onions and peppers, but if they have a mixture,
you can buy those frozen too, and you just heat them up in your skillet. We have done that for camping trips.
Yes.
So if we wanted to make hot breakfast burritos on a camping trip,
my dad's done that.
All you do is throw that in a skillet and let those fry up, and you can also cook bacon and eggs and have cheese and your raw tortillas. We've done the whole assembly line. But if you have an oven, the crispy crowns are our favorite. And the tortillas she's talking about, the common ones that we find in the grocery store, they really are everywhere, including places like Sam's Club and Costco. But it's Tortilla Land, ready to cook, soft taco size flour tortillas. And you just cook them on the stovetop for about 30 seconds on each side. And they are my favorite as well. We recently, Max and I were trying to make some breakfast burritos before I went on a trip to the South, which is where I am now, to visit family. And Max and I were making some breakfast burritos, and we ran to a store that we weren't real familiar with the whole layout, and we could not find these. And so I just picked up some tortillas off the shelf, and we made breakfast burritos with them, and they were not as good.
It's a texture thing. They get soggy to me.
Well, and they were just too thick. And
oh yes, that too.
The taste wasn't there.
That's a go-to, and I will assemble it and then wrap it in cling wrap or cellophane, and then I will wrap that in with aluminum foil and throw it in the freezer. I don't know. Do you have any better ideas for storage? That's my way of getting it to stay together in the burrito form.
Mm-hmm. I think when you unwrap it, to heat it, if you put it in an oven, they're going to dry out. We usually defrost it in a microwave.
Yeah.
With like a damp paper towel on top. Mm-hmm. Some people don't have microwaves, and so you could just defrost it in the oven, but you just want to maybe do it really low because you don't want them to dry out. Or pull them out the night before and let them defrost in the fridge.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so another one we've mentioned were muffins, and I have done blueberry lemon muffins, but my favorite, and I think everyone who's tried them, are the famous Bess Hawthorne mocha banana chocolate chip muffins. And the mocha part is an instant coffee, and it's my favorite thing to use. Instead of making banana bread when you have old bananas, this is my favorite recipe because it's, you don't really get tired of it. Like we mentioned, it could be breakfast or snack, dessert, and it gives you a little energy. That coffee, I don't know, I'm sensitive to caffeine, so it gives a little energy, and I add extra chocolate chips in mine.
Yes, and you can get decaf instant coffee if you want.
If you just like the coffee flavor.
If you like if you're worried about it for kids.
Oh, as a kid, I would not be able to eat
tablespoons.
them. Yeah, I wouldn't give them to Joyce.
Well,
that's such a good idea.
If you want to, it is a couple of tablespoons of instant coffee in the batter. And so, yeah, for kids, you could do decaf. Okay. I've done that before if I'm serving them to a bunch of kids.
Good idea. Okay, and then along that same lines is scones, and I don't really make a lot of scones, and I would not be a scone fan. And typically, I would never think of myself as a scone person. It sounds so sophisticated, but the cherry chocolate chip scone recipe, and I don't know, I got it from you, but I don't know who originated it, but it is so good. And I freeze them. I will say they are not, out of all of the things I'm listing, these probably do lose a little bit of the quality, I guess, being frozen. And that might be my bad for not defrosting them first. I just pop them straight in the microwave. But regardless, they're so good.
They are the best scones I've ever had. Mm-hmm. I make other scone recipes and am slightly disappointed. The cherry chocolate chip are the most delicious.
So good.
And back to the muffins real quick. I've made hundreds and hundreds of these muffins. Potentially more than that, honestly.
I have too in my short life.
Years. And they are always such a hit. And just one tip about baked goods, as far as the sweeter type things, I don't typically mess with scones. Scones you want really light and airy, but with muffins or pancakes or waffles, I often, to make it a little bit heartier and a little more nutritious, I usually do at least half. Some people do all whole wheat. To me, that can be a bit dense, but I usually do at least half whole wheat and half unbleached all white or all-purpose flour. Now, some people do even more than that. You can do it to your taste, but to give it some nutrition, not only do I add whole wheat flour with the muffins, but we put in oats or oat flour, wheat germ, wheat bran. You can put in ground flaxseed. We just kind of play around with the different things that we want to put in there. I usually do put a little bit of white flour in there to lighten it up, But another tip is spelt flour, which can be expensive, but if you find it in a bulk section, like say in our town, there Winco has a bulk section and has spelt flour. It is an ancient wheat flour that's lighter than the typical whole wheat that you find, and you can add that in place of some of your white flour, and it's very nutritious, but it's lighter.
I think we've done that with the waffles as well. I know you mentioned that we make those in bulk and freeze those. And I like to cook them a little less than I typically would if I'm freezing them, because when I reheat them, I put them in the toaster. I don't know what the term for that is. Well, I know for spaghetti it's called al dente, but I don't think you can make al dente waffles.
Smitten Kitchen recently released at the beginning of March an article about what you're talking about. Her article is called Easy Freezer Waffles. And she calls it par cooking.
Par cooking.
Instead of like when you say parboiling, I've never heard of par cooking. It's until they're just set. And then when you're putting it into the toast, they look undercooked, but they'll hold together and freeze. But then when you take it out and put it in the toaster, they cook to perfection instead of being dry. Now, if you're doing a whole batch, like let's say you had a big family and you just want to put them all on sheets in the oven, I would imagine it would do the same thing. But I haven't tried that. I've only done a toaster. I haven't done that
either, but that is a good idea. Yeah, that's a favorite of ours is the waffles. Now, pancakes, I have done pancakes in the freezer. That's typically something I like fresh, hot and fresh. But for my kids, this might be a little controversial, but I've done a pan bake of pancakes. So I'll get, it's on 9x13. It's the sheet pan, a cookie sheet pan with the rims. And I've done it, I think, with a box, like the Kodiak box cake. I don't know if I've tried it with like a homemade recipe, but I will just whip that up and pour all the batter, and I think I've used parchment paper on the bottom, so it's easier to pull up. So bake that, and then I will use a pizza cutter and cut it in squares and have those ready in the freezer for whenever, little one wants pancakes every morning for 2 months straight, and I don't feel like making it.
Every morning for 2 months straight.
Yeah. Thankfully right now it's a yogurt and granola kick, so.
I have not done that. We're going to have to find that recipe and post it.
Yes. I don't know. I might be making that up, but I'm sure there's a recipe out there. You can,
if it's your made up one, we'll post that one as well.
You can add blueberries, chocolate chips, anything typical. And it might look a little weird, but
that makes breakfast so
easy, especially for kids.
We'll talk about a little bit later about what to freeze things in, but since we're talking about waffles and pancakes, how do you put those in freezer bags? Do you put something between them?
I have not ever done that, and that might be helpful because at times whenever I am too impatient to let my waffles defrost before separating them, they will tear. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, on this Smitten Kitchen article that she was talking about the par baking the waffles or par cooking the waffles, she says to freeze waffles on the rack, the cooling rack that you put them on, which is another tip. Sometimes when I see people pull out waffles or pancakes, they just put them on a stack like the typical TV episode, where you see this giant stack of steaming pancakes. Well, the problem is that the top one looks really nice and may have a little crispness to it. The rest are just a soggy mess because they just steam into each other. So if you're planning on not eating them instantly, you really need to spread them out on a cooling rack and let them cool and not steam into each other before putting them in the freezer. And so that's what I usually do. I have from when I was married so many years ago, I still have a set of 3 cooling racks that stack on top of each other. And so I just do that and then pull off, do 3 layers and then pull off the bottom ones and start over. And so I let them cool and then put them in bags. I put waxed paper between each one. And so then they just slide right out.
Yes.
They don't stick to each other at all. Back to her article, she says to freeze the waffles on the rack until solid, an hour or 2 or overnight, and then once solid, transfer to an airtight bag or container, which would work. You can do that with anything. You can partially freeze it and the outside is frozen and then put it into a freezer bag or another container. That would work. The problem with waffles for me is there is no way I am ever freezing like 3 waffles. I would not have enough racks and freezer space to individually lay 30 waffles.
Right.
So for me, the trick is the wax paper in between. or parchment paper. I'm saying wax paper.
I bet you could do
either one.
I think wax paper is a little more expensive.
Okay, I meant to say parchment paper.
Yeah, the parchment paper.
There's also things like nonstick foil, but parchment paper is probably the easiest and probably the most affordable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good tip. I have 2 more, sorry. French toast. This is one of my favorites, and I like using the fancy brioche bread. I've done, I think it's Newman's Own sandwich bread. It is not my favorite, and I could be just a little bougie. I'm spoiled from having it at, brunch, out to eat at brunch. I'm like, I want to recreate this at home. So Trader Joe's has the pre-sliced brioche bread, and that's my favorite. I think Walmart has it too. It's a little more expensive there, but I just, if you are getting it from Trader Joe's, do not forget to peel off the little, I think they have paper around the edge. I made it one time, and
oh no,
I ate like 2 pieces of, 2 entire pieces of French toast with the paper on it. I was like, this is just, the edges are just a little weird.
Chewy.
They're a little chewy. And then I realized that I had cooked the paper onto the French toast.
So they slice it with...
It's pre-sliced, but the paper is pre-sliced too.
That's a little weird.
And yeah, you got to peel it off. Don't forget that. There's a little hot tip for you. But I don't use a recipe. I grew up my dad making these with, I think, eggs, heavy cream, cinnamon, and vanilla extract. And I can't remember if there's anything else. But I love freezing those. They're the same thing with waffles. Do it on a, not a drying rack. What do you call it?
Cooling
rack. Yeah, cooling rack. And
drying rack would probably work as well. Laundry might be a little sticky later.
Yeah. They reheat really well. And then my last go-to is a quiche. And this is really one I'm thinking of for cost efficiency, because you can get I think it's pre-made pie crust that are frozen. I want to say they're frozen. It comes in a pack of 2. I like the deep dish so you can get more of the filling, but it is super cheap I shop at Walmart, so that's what I'm telling you. It's cheap at Walmart. And I think most recipes you follow online will tell you, I want to say 4 eggs maybe in one, which to me, I'm like, hey, I can sit down and just eat 4 scrambled eggs. I'm not going to, only put 4 eggs in one pie. I think the rest is normally milk and cheese, but I do as many. So think about it. A quiche is about 8 servings. So I want, 1 to 2 eggs per, not really 2, but 1
especially if you're feeding an entire family.
Yes,
you don't want 4 eggs spread among 8 people on a big pie.
Yeah. And that could be, different people might think otherwise for texture, but I haven't found anything offensive. I like having about 6 to 12 eggs in each, if it'll fit, of course, and then just a little bit of milk and cheese. You can of course add bacon, sausage, and ham. I'm trying to think if I've done anything else. That's typically all I do is salt and pepper. You can make it fancy and add all kinds of seasonings, sure, peppers and onions, but that's my favorite way to cook that. And it's so good for, like we were saying, giving it to people because they can use it for breakfast or lunch or dinner. That's my favorite. That was my favorite thing to feed Joy. I think she had turned 1, and that was, probably about 18 months. She started loving eggs, and I don't want to scramble eggs every morning. And, it's a fun way to eat it.
Yes, just being able to pull out a slice of quiche from the freezer is the perfect.
It's also cute hearing your 18-month-old say quiche. It's so cute.
Quiche mama.
Quiche mom. Yeah.
Another fabulous idea, which would also work for really any time of day, is bread. A lot of people do make homemade bread and freeze it, and there's nothing rocket science about that. But I have enjoyed pre-slicing some of my loaves where you can just pop off a few slices. If you have a friend over to eat lunch, or if it's just a few people for breakfast, you don't have to defrost an entire loaf. You can pull off a frozen slice and put it in the toaster and have delicious bread with butter and jam, or butter and honey, or butter and salt and pepper if you wanted it savory.
Such a good
garlic
idea.
bread.
Yes, garlic bread. That's what I was thinking for spaghetti. That's how they sell, if you buy a Texas toast or something, that's how they sell it, is the, slice by slice, because how often are you eating an entire loaf of bread for dinner, if there's just a couple, if it's just you and your husband or you and your kids.
And if you're taking it to someone that's a small family, like say a husband and wife, or they just have one baby, sometimes taking an entire loaf, it's so much easier. Or they enjoy it longer if it's pre-sliced and they can put it in their freezer and just pull it out when they need it because they may not eat an entire loaf before it starts going stale.
That's such a good idea.
Another amazing thing for breakfast is pre-cooking your breakfast meats, especially before company comes over. I really enjoy doing this when we know we're having overnight company, is pre-cooking bacon. And you can also pre-cook sausage. But pre-cooking bacon especially, and then just lining it up in the strips in your gallon freezer bag, because then you can just take out exactly what you need, how many slices, you can heat it up in the oven. Some people have air fryers that they heat it up in, and you kind of have instant breakfast meat without having to do any mess or cleanup.
Or smell. I mean, if you're reheating it, a little bit of smell, but
nothing like when it's cooking.
And often, I can't tell you how many times we burnt our bacon because, you know, we're talking and I'm, you know, morning time, you're cooking everything else and it's like, I burnt the bacon. I already have it cooked. Oh yeah, I'm going to start doing that.
On my index, I have a recipe for mine and garden. I'm sure there's a million out there, but just the oven, cooking bacon in an oven, the oven method. So I'll put a link to that, but that makes it really easy because you can take a giant cookie sheet and just line up your strips of bacon and bake it in the oven. And I don't know, I don't remember the exact time and temperature, but you can do that until your package is gone, put it in a freezer bag, and you are ready for mini breakfasts.
And I saw this tip. I have not tried it yet, so I think it's trending right now of twisting, and maybe it's just, you know, whatever my algorithm is, all the cooking people I follow, but it is twisting your bacon up. So if I'm doing a whole pack of bacon, it's not going to fit on, you know, a whole pound's not going to fit on a cookie sheet. So if you twist it up to make, I mean, I'm trying to think, do they do that? Is it cinnamon sticks or something like that? Where
there are cinnamon twists.
Cinnamon twists, that's what I'm thinking, yeah. So do that same thing with bacon. You just twist it up and line it all in your sheet pan, bake it like that. Then especially if you like your bacon crunchy, I don't think it would be good for anyone who likes it a little chewy because it
I love
crisps
mine
it
crunchy.
up. I do too. And especially if you're making bacon bits out
crisp,
of it.
not crunchy. Crisp.
Yeah, definitely don't like the burnt, but that will allow you to cook all at the same time and, you know, save room so you don't have to, save space and you don't have to cook several pans of it.
Interesting.
So we'll have to try that out. If anyone tries it out, let us know.
I will have to try this. I've never even seen that before, but I love that idea.
Yeah.
What about lunch? I think that lunch and dinner overlap, honestly, because a lot of times people are eating leftovers from the dinner the night before. If you do a specific lunch thing, sometimes it's a soup or a salad or a sandwich, which are not really freezer. Some could be freezer friendly, but we'll kind of overlap with that. Okay. Mostly we're going to talk about dinner, and then if something comes up that could be really just specifically for lunch, we'll mention that, but I think really either one would work for
Yeah, I typically do leftovers. Category. I do leftovers for lunch, and kind of back to what you're saying about pre-cooking meat. Whenever I buy ground beef or sausage and chicken, that's typically we don't do too much pork, but with those three, I will cook them immediately because there's typical recipes that I just am always going to, you know, want to have some pre-cooked ground beef on hand or, you know, sausage ready. I don't really ever need fresh sausage, ground sausage. So I will just go ahead and cook those and freeze them. But for the ground beef, I'm either making taco or spaghetti, you know, maybe that's just the South in me, but we love those about, you know, once every 2 months or something. So if I wait till 30 minutes for dinner, I can boil a pot of noodles, throw some jars of pasta sauce, and pull out my spaghetti meat, which I like mixing the ground sausage with the spaghetti meat. So I will ground, you know, several pounds of ground beef, and then half of it I'll do Italian seasoning and half of it I'll do taco seasoning. Freeze that individually and have it ready for either one of those. That's my
If you have meat pre-done, half your meal is
done.
It
is. It makes dinner, you know, cooking dinner sound, I mean, it just seems so less intimidating.
It so much. I have done that with rotisserie chickens from Costco or Sam's. They're $5, around $5. If you take a rotisserie chicken, debone it, put it all in a freezer bag. I mean, chop it up if it's, you know, if it needs to be chopped a little bit into bite-sized pieces. Let's take a quick break. Are you searching for hands-on activities to help your kids explore the practical side of science? Look no further than your kitchen. Inquisicook blends food science and culinary arts into an engaging program that puts delicious food on the family table. Let Inquisicook do the teaching with lesson videos, reliable recipes, and assessment tools that put students on track for success. Their online platform is easy to navigate and optimized for mobile, so the learning experience can move from the classroom to the kitchen without a hitch. Inquisicook turns curious students into intuitive cooks, not just recipe followers. Say goodbye to the tyranny of the ingredients list and say hello to utilizing what's in season, what's on sale, or what's in the fridge. Visit inquisicook.com to view sample lessons, then check out the recipe gallery to see just how crave-worthy science can be. As Serena mentioned earlier, your future self will thank you.
Yes.
You can use that for chicken spaghetti. You can use it for chicken pot pie. You can use it for soups. You can use it for quesadillas.
Casseroles.
It's so
I've got
delicious.
a freezer bag in my freezer right now.
If you don't want to debone a rotisserie chicken, then you can do the same thing by just cooking some chicken breasts and then doing the same thing. Putting them in a KitchenAid would be the easiest way to kind of break them up a bit and have them into bite-sized pieces, maybe chop them a little bit and put them in freezer bags, and then you have your meat ready to go to put into whatever dinner might be.
Yes, and that's my favorite way to do the chicken is shredded, but my husband loves Chipotle, and he eats a lot. So I'm like, well, you know, anytime we go out to eat, fast food is what I'm speaking of. I mean, it's $20. So I'm like, honey, anytime you want Chipotle, you just tell me and you go out in the freezer and I will have the chicken already done. It's cubed. I cube it like, you know, they do. I have the seasoning and then I have done the frozen corn and beans and rotel, but I don't see a need to do that since I just pour the cans in the saucepan whenever he wants it. But that is my favorite quick and easy meal. I don't freeze anything except for the chicken, but you can cube it. You can do strips for salad or anything. Yeah.
I think one of my favorites for chicken is Samantha's chicken spaghetti. She was on here early on too. She probably did the third podcast, second or third.
I think she was, yeah.
Somewhere at the very beginning, she did a chicken spaghetti, and that is so easy to put together if your meat is pre-done. That recipe I really, really like too because she came up with a homemade cream of sauce. The recipe on that one calls for a cream of mushrooms, so you could add your own mushrooms, but it's really just a cream sauce that you could season any way you liked it, whether it was mushroom seasoning, which Trader Joe's has a mushroom seasoning that's really delicious. Or it could be celery, it could be onion or garlic or whatever you like, but it's homemade cream sauce that really takes just a few minutes to make, and it's tastier than a can.
Yes, and
a can of cream.
The can's it does look kind of gross coming out.
Yes,
that I have made chicken spaghetti. I think that's probably the most popular meal or my most frequent freezer meal because it's such a comfort food and it's so easy. I boil several pounds of noodles, several pounds of chicken. And, you know, you have, I think it's chicken broth, cream of chicken, cream of mushroom, and some rotel and slap your mama. That's our favorite seasoning, some cheese. And I'll do just huge aluminum pans and take it if, you know, we're going to family's house. And I did that one time. Like, I don't want to just, hey, my whole crew's coming and here, you know, now we got to find something for 20 people. Well, here's a big vat of chicken spaghetti.
And kids love it.
Yes. Kids and adults, every age, it's kind of a fan favorite, except for me. I'm the weirdo that doesn't like it. I've cooked it so much, but I actually have only eaten it once.
Is it texture for you?
It's texture. I don't know. I'm a picky person. So half the things I mentioned, I probably don't even eat.
As much as she cooks, I can hardly believe this.
Yeah, I really like to cook, but just...
Sometimes you're doing it to bless other
I do,
people.
more so.
It's not your favorite thing.
Especially when I'm pregnant, I tell Tim, I said, I'm cooking I will cook as much food for you, just let me go to Chick-fil-A. That
was your craving.
Yes, that was my pregnancy craving. Like, just let me go to Chick-fil-A whenever. I mean, I'll cook you all the food in the world. Don't make me eat chicken spaghetti. But that's a great freezer meal because it reheats really well. Because I think that, I don't know if it's Samantha's recipe is like this, but mine, the end, like you know, everything's cooked and then you bake it. So when you pull it out of the freezer, you're doing that last step and it's cooking it, you know, I would say congealing. That's kind of a gross word, but it's melding everything together.
Melding
nicely.
everything, making it bubbly and hot. And
Yes.
golden on the edges. Another great option for chicken is chicken pot pie or chicken and corn and bean and cheese, that kind of thing. Not egg rolls, burritos. Chili's, the restaurant, the chain restaurant, years ago, I'm not sure they still have it, but they had a recipe called Southwest. No, is it Southwest?
I think
egg rolls.
Southwestern.
Egg rolls was really misleading. It's burritos. And so I have taken the raw tortillas and done the same thing, just like breakfast burritos, except have a chicken, bean, cheese filling. And one way to make it really fast, my twin sister Ruth, she has a really good recipe for that, where you have this filling and then at the end you make an avocado ranch dipping sauce. It's delicious. And you can even deep fry. I think maybe at Chili's they deep fried. So she had a copycat recipe that she came up with that did all of that. For me, I don't. I just use the raw and have the burritos and freeze them. I have bought, I think it's by Bird's Eye, a Southwest blend that has the beans, the corn, the peppers, the onions, something like that. A combination where instead of having to buy all of those things separate, you have it all in a bag and you put it with your chicken, some seasonings, I think I add cheese, super fast, throw it in a tortilla and freeze it. And then when you get it out, you can use bottled ranch or make your own really quick if you do have time to make your own ranch or your own avocado ranch. But those have also been a huge hit, perfect for lunches or dinner.
And I bet they're good in the air fryer. I know you said deep frying, but the air fryer probably crisp them up. And
I have not tried that, but I bet they would be amazing.
And if I think with the air fryer, sometimes it can just crisp things up. But I like spraying some olive oil spray on the outside to make it something for the air fryer to actually fry. But I know most people do air fryer to cut back on the oils, but
I feel like a little bit of olive oil would be a health food.
It absolutely is.
So if you ask the Italians, this is how one of the secrets to their long life. More olive oil.
Yes.
So that's chickens. We've mentioned beef ideas.
I have more beef ideas.
Okay.
I am like,
Give me some beef ideas.
I cook with beef more than anything else. And I've done an episode on meatballs. So again, I'll plug that. They are, the recipe I use is really versatile because you can use them for spaghetti sauce or a meatballs and cream sauce, really anything. I've started for joy I've kind of been sneaking in some broccoli in there, so I'll steam broccoli and add it to my meatball mixture and add some cheese in there. I mean, any kind of meatball freeze as well. And then also meatloaf patties. And this is the trick. If you hear meatloaf and are already plugging your ears, open them back up. This is the best meatloaf you will ever have. It is, I think, called little cheddar meatloaf patties. Is that what your recipe's called? Am I saying it right?
At some point back in the day, I think that's what I called them. The latest thing I called them was mini meatloaves, but I think I need to get rid of that term because like she said, most people, when they think of meatloaf, it sounds like a soft meat
cafeteria
kind
of scoop.
And my kids have told me, oh, meatloaf, gross. It's like, well, okay, maybe I should go back to calling these meat patties because they're small serving sizes, they're individual, and so they crisp up on all sides and they are delicious. I think the term meatloaf comes from the sauce that you put on top. So you make meat patties, but then on the top you do put this ketchup, mustard, brown sugar mixture before you bake it. A little sauce on top, which also makes it really delicious.
Yes.
But it's not your typical meatloaf.
It is not. And I love to add a little Worcestershire. Am I saying it right?
I don't know. Don't ask me.
Inside mine, it's a really simple recipe, but if you want to add, I think I've done the Trader Joe's 21 season salute, just add extra flavoring, kind of make it seem a little more fancy. But for freezing those, I have had problems with the sauce getting stuck on the Ziploc bags whenever I freeze it. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, I think the best way to do things, if you have a space, if you have a tiny freezer above your refrigerator, this is not going to work. But if you are able to lay them flat on your cookie sheet and just partially freeze them where the top is frozen, you could stack them without them sticking to each other.
Oh, okay. That is so good, because I've at times just not made the sauce, and it's not near as good without it.
I guess if you did it that way, you could put it on right before you cooked it or before you heated it up. But the sauce does cook with the meatballs for 45 minutes.
It's really good.
So
all
it
the
may
way
not
cooked.
work that way.
You got to get the brown sugar caramelized in with the ketchup and mustard.
You might, if you didn't have room in a freezer, like say a deep freeze, to put a cookie tray in to let them partially freeze, the sauce might firm up if you put it in the refrigerator, potentially, and then tried to put it in a freezer bag. Not sure.
Yeah,
Be worth trying.
That's a good tip. That is all I have for lunch and dinner. Do you have any other?
Well, a few more
favorites?
beef ideas. You mentioned meatballs. Pioneer Woman has a recipe. It may be in one of her cookbooks. I'm not sure if it's online. But speaking of meatballs, she takes 5 pounds and turns them all into meatballs and then pulls out what she wants and has 3 different sauce ideas.
Ooh.
So when you think about meatballs, it's not just spaghetti and meatballs. She has a Hawaiian sauce and I think serves it with rice. And then there's a barbecue sauce with meatballs that I think she serves over mashed potatoes. And then, of course, the spaghetti and meatballs is over noodles.
So
versatile. You can think of all different things you could do with meatballs. And, of course, the top recipe for meatballs is Serena's cream sauce over...
I think it's over rice is what I like to serve over. You can do mashed potatoes as well.
So they are very versatile. My hot tip for making meatballs is using a cookie scoop with a trigger.
Oh, my word. My life will be changed.
The standard cookie scoop, I will put a link to the one that I use. I think if somebody was a baker, there's all different sizes. I have the 2 standard ones, like a small one and a large one. The small one is what would make a typical cookie, and the large one is what would be an
ice cream scoop.
It looks like an ice cream scoop, but it's the perfect size for scooping muffins. And I use it. I just scoop and squeeze. And
that will save so much time.
So easier.
I wish I would have known that 2 days ago. I think I formed, it felt like hundreds of meatballs by hand, but I am going to add that to my Walmart order.
So much time and mess, but really the reason I like it the most is because it's cooked so uniform.
Yes.
So if you're trying to use 2 spoons or your hands or whatever, inevitably you're going to have one that's bigger and one that's teensy and all that.
Overcooked,
so
undercooked.
Makes it so uniform, and they all turn out looking lovely. Like say if you're doing muffins, they're all exactly the same. If you're putting them out at a baby shower or a nice brunch with ladies or whatever, they all look like they're supposed to look. So
love that.
That's my hot tip there, and you can really go fast and get a lot done and put them in freezer bags, and your future self will thank you. Muffin liners, I need to mention that if you're making a ton of muffins, really you need to get foil liners. And a lot of the foil liners have the way that the foil stays like it's supposed to is it has a paper in between each foil liner. And a mistake I've seen people make is using that paper. Like they take the foil and then keep the paper in it and then put their muffin batter. I don't think you're supposed to use it like that. I never have. I've always taken that paper out and pushed it to the side. You use just the foil because that's the non-stick part. And so you can keep your muffin tins completely clean, and you can freeze it in the foil. It freezes just fine. Or you can take the foil off and freeze them like that. But they freeze in the foil great, but it peels off without tearing your muffin. But the paper, if it cooks in the paper, that is definitely not non-stick, and it makes a mess. So hot tip there. And using the muffin cups allows you to pull them out of your pan and still have a clean pan if you're making a large quantity. My last ideas for beef would be using ground beef to make sloppy joe meat, or you could do meat pies like empanadas, but that does take a little bit more time. It's kind of time consuming. But if you do a bunch of them, they're great to throw in freezer bags. And cuts of meat. So you can pre-cook brisket, you can pre-cook pulled pork, things like that where it's just completely done and in a freezer bag ready to pull out and heat. That also works really well. So besides meals, do you have any other kind of extra tips that you would add, Serena?
A couple of items I do like to keep on hand in the freezer are fruits. You know, sometimes, it's very rarely, but sometimes we do have some fruits that are looking, you know, not like they want to be eaten, but more like in a smoothie. So I do freeze that, and especially in the summertime, a lot of leftovers, strawberries and bananas especially. And onions, I have for the longest time been buying the pre-chopped onions that are from the store, and finally took it upon myself to get one of those vegetable choppers. I think they're called Full Star is the brand that I have, and I actually saw it recommended on your website, and it has changed my life. I will get just a 3 or 5 pound bag of onions and just do it myself, and you know, Tim will do it for me most of the time because I do I cry all the time with onions. So that has I feel like that saves money instead of doing the pre-chopped. Just can get bulk quantities frozen, and that just really saves time because you can do the same thing with peppers. Most of the time when I see a recipe and it calls for chopped onions, if I don't have anything pre-chopped, I just kind of skip over that recipe and get something a little easier because it just seems like a hassle to get out. It just ruins my whole cooking experience.
Well, I will second the veggie chopper, the Full Star, or recently I was in Ross and Marshall's, TJ Maxx, those kind of stores, and saw that there are other brands that make a very similar or same device. I saw one from Cuisinart, OXO, and they were $15 to $17, which is pretty cheap.
That's a really good deal.
Very good deal. And Full Star online is actually not very expensive either. I have multiple links and they have different blades. You for sure want the small dice and the large dice, and they probably all come with that. But then the Full Star, you can get other blades as well. So you can pick the thing that you would use the most. I made a soup recently where you had to dice potatoes, onions, peppers, jalapenos, more things than that. I can't even remember all the things. And I just slammed that food chopper down over and over and over, doing it as fast as I could go because I was trying to get lots of things done for a big gathering. I saved so much time using that chopper.
At least 30 minutes, yeah.
Yes. Normally I would have been in there dicing and slicing forever, trying to make it uniform and get everything just right. And that thing, besides the speed, I love how uniform it is, so everything kind of cooks about the same.
Release your aggression.
Yes, any kind. It's therapeutic.
Yep. Just slam that thing down.
Slam that thing down. If you try to do it soft, it's not working.
You're doing it wrong.
You are doing it wrong. It is not going to work. You'll take it back to the store. You have to slam it.
Yes. That's so nice for having things on hand. Last thing I like keeping on hand, I've just recently started doing this, is making my chicken stock and beef broth and bone broth in the crock pot. And making it homemade is really easy, and it might sound intimidating, but if you've got a big crock pot, and I think you can do it in a stock pot as well, but I haven't done that because you do want to cook it for over 24 hours. For my chicken one, I like using the local chicken. So I don't know. It makes me feel like it's a little, less GMOs or none. And I get to use the meat off of that after I cook the whole chicken. And so I'll bake it in the oven, and then I will use the carcass and buy chicken feet and use onions and celery and carrots and add just full of water, this crock pot, and then just strain it after 24 to 48 hours, and it makes beautiful, just gelatinous stock. That's what the feet are for. I know chicken feet sounds a little gross, and it looks gross. It really is. I think I scarred Tim by bringing it home.
How many do you have to put in there?
I think I did two per batch.
Where do you buy them?
I have a local.
Never bought chicken feet.
I would have never known about this. Yeah, my crunchy friend told me about it, but the farmer's market doesn't have it, but we have, and I think it's nationwide. It's called Rico Farmer's Market, so the surrounding areas, farmers will meet up. Ours in town is on a Thursday, and they meet up in random parking lot. It sounds, black market, but it's not. It's on Facebook, and you can just add yourself to the list, and they post what's options from different farms and farmers around the area. So I think farmers will drive from, it's up to an hour away and just meet once a week. And, you place your order and pay for it ahead of time and you just go pick it up. It's not necessary if you don't, if you feel grossed out by chicken feet, it's not necessary. It just really makes it gelatinous.
It makes it thicker and where you can use, it's not just a real thin broth.
Yes. Yeah. It makes it hearty. And I love freezing the broth in the ice cube trays and just breaking those off into a gallon freezer bag and just pull them out and put them in rice whenever I'm cooking. And I do the same thing with the beef. Okay, so it's REKO.
REKO.
And I could be saying it wrong. Rico Ring. I need to figure out what it stands for, but I think they have them if they have it in Texarkana, they've got to have it in other places, but.
Well, we have a fabulous farmer's market where I'm from. Mm-hmm. Being able to kind of know your vendors and farmers and put orders in ahead of time, that's pretty
It is, yeah. Amazing. You just pay on Venmo, Cash App. It's nice. So I've done that with the chicken feet. I put it in my chicken stock, but also in my bone broth. And I use marrow bones. So I don't know if it's a hot tip. This might not be very hot, but once I put the bone marrow bones and same things, onion, carrot, celery in the water, I will scrape out the marrow from the bones and mix it up puree it with the carrots and make baby food. That is it's so nutritious, and some of the broth too. And Atticus is 10 months now, and he's been eating that for 2 months, since he was taking solids, and loves it. And it's an acquired taste for like a couple days, and then he's very bougie in his appetite. He gets
5-star restaurant.
Yes.
I know. I don't remember when the trend came in, but at high-end restaurants, they were selling a bone on a plate where you could scoop the marrow out. Oh my goodness. I'm not kidding you.
I remember sucking the marrow from like chicken legs, which is probably, it's probably like, awful quality, but I remember doing that as a kid and loving it. But I'm afraid to try it now, but I will feed it to my 8-month-old, my little one, because I do know it is good for you. And it's good quality. If you get good quality, that's kind of the whole point. I do that. I've always bought it. Beef bouillon, not the cubes, but the paste. What's it called?
It's better than bouillon.
Something. I think that's what it's called.
Chicken base or
chicken
beef
base. Yes, and that is just. It has corn syrup in it, which I'm like, well, that's not very necessary. So I learned from a friend how to do it.
She's gone to making her own.
It's a little extra, but it really is so flavorful because you can add spices, and it just makes regular rice. It just elevates a dish.
Well, and if you have it in ice cube trays, you can pick the amount you want, and it's instant broth.
Yeah, you don't have the leftover cartons in the fridge.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah. You're not wasting any. It's healthy. You know what's gone into it. You can season it the way you like. That's a very good tip. I would say the other things that I would suggest would have to be desserts.
Ooh.
Lots of people know tips on freezing dessert. My favorite is cookie dough balls before you cook them. Some people cook the cookie and freeze it whole, which still is good.
Hot, fresh cookies. You can't beat that.
Cookies. I'm all about that. So I have, until they're all eaten, I currently do not have. My goal is to always have chocolate chip cookie dough balls in the freezer so that you can bring them out anytime and have a hot chocolate chip cookie to serve guests. The other thing is cake layers. Brie Vestal did an episode on cakes, and I'm pretty sure she froze all the different components of making a cake.
Including the frosting?
I think so.
Oh, wow.
I need to go back and re-listen to her tips, but I'm pretty sure she did talk about that. And one of her recommendations was to freeze the cake layers still a little bit warm, because when you wrap them up, it keeps the moisture inside. I always cool things all the way down. And so that was an interesting tip for me to think about with a cake, because you do want some moisture to stay in there. It will dry out probably a little bit in the freezer. It's okay to wrap it warm.
Well, that's neat. Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of other desserts that could be done that way as well. So desserts. And then what about storing all these things? What would you recommend storing these kind of things? And we've talked a lot about freezer bags. There's quart bags and there's gallon bags. Do you have any other hot tips?
I do like using the aluminum pans. I think I mentioned that. And I used to get them at the Dollar Tree, but it's now the $1.25 tree. And so it's a lot cheaper for me just to get them in bulk at Sam's Club. And I think they're running a sale right now, 10 or 11 bucks for over 25 of them. There's probably 40 or something. So that's my favorite method, using those, because when you are giving food as gifts, you don't have to ask for a pan in return, and you don't have to have your one 9x13 be stuck in the freezer. And I just cover it with cling wrap and foil, and have recently been turned on to the Glad has some kind of product. It's sticky, and I think it's called, it's not press and seal.
I think it is the press and seal.
Is it press and seal? Okay, something like that. And
we were talking about this earlier. They have like a cling and seal and a press and seal, but I think the press and seal is the one that has sticky on it. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
The one that's sticky?
Yes, and it is yes, it's called press and seal, and it is so much better than cling wrap, such higher quality, because that cling wrap and I do not get along. It is always just flying off. I'm carrying a meal into somebody's house, and the cling wrap's all in a ball in my hand. I'm like, I promise I brought this cover. But it does not stick. Yeah, it just doesn't stick to anything. So this stuff is awesome. They have it in regular and in the freezer, a freezer type, but I think the regular would do just fine in the freezer. But they do have a cling and
seal, but I don't know how that's different. I know the press and seal has the sticky, and then there's just cling wrap. Mm-hmm. And so that's the one I'm thinking you're saying is not very
cling
good.
Wrap, I think it's called cellophane or something
cling
as well.
And seal? I don't know. I'll have to look up reviews on that.
Hey, I press and seal, so you can like squeeze it around the edges, and it stays.
And it sticks a little
stuck.
bit to whatever you're trying to squeeze it onto.
Mm-hmm. But that's the only two methods I have. I am very interested in other.
I agree. That's what I use. I'm sure people have containers that they use. I don't have enough containers. I almost always use bags that can be, I guess, puzzle pieced around the freezer. I like to use the pans because they can stay out there as long as they need to. And if I'm giving it away, I never want to have to get it back if possible. I try to avoid giving a dish where I have to get it back. It's not always the case, but I try to make it easy on the person I'm giving it to. The other trick that I would say as far as sealing it, some people have vacuum sealers, but if you're putting bags in the freezer, I saw a trick probably on Instagram where you can vacuum seal it or imitate vacuum sealing it yourself. And so you can squeeze all the air out of a freezer bag, but there's still going to be quite a bit left in there, which would lead to ice crystals and things like that. And so to make it stay fresher a little bit longer, I use this trick. All you do is close the gallon bag, squeezing out as much air as you can, and then open just the very corner and put a straw in, and it's almost like you're drinking the air out of the bag.
Well, that's a lot more sanitary than using your mouth, which I have seen gone viral in a bad way recently on my Instagram.
I've never seen that.
The straw will be a lot more sanitary.
Oh my word. Well, especially if you're handing it to a friend or neighbor.
All my lips have been all around it.
Oh my goodness. Oh, made with love.
It's like when you used to send, your lipsticks kiss on a mail it to your boyfriend.
Right. Nobody wants that on the edge of their freezer bag with
their
muffins.
bag of muffins. Yeah.
Well, this, you just put a straw in, and you're just like, you suck on the straw a few times, and in between, while you're taking a breath, you squeeze the straw so no more air goes back in. But once you've done that, say 3 times, the bag is vacuum sealed, really. I mean, it's not as good as a vacuum sealer, but almost. It really works well.
That's such a good idea.
So when do you prep freezer meals? Do you have a certain day, like a Saturday, where you just dedicate it, or do you just make a meal and double it, usually, and then freeze that?
I often will just make extra, although recently my husband's been bulking, which for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it just means eating a lot of food, trying to put on more muscle. So I have not been able to be just doubling and freezing. I have to set aside a day where I'm making just extra, I guess I would say freezer specific meals. But if I can, I would do just double a recipe and freeze some. Although we like leftovers, so it's very few and far between that I get to do that. But I really just rely on days when I have a lot of energy. That's about the only time I'm motivated and energized to go ahead and freeze stuff. For whenever I'm not, because my energy levels are waxing and waning. I try to take advantage of when I do have that energy and time. If I do have time, I will make sure I'm just preparing for my future self to thank me, as we've said before.
She's a saint for taking over feeding my son. He is, what is he?
He's 6'4", way over 200 pounds. But it's all muscle. Like he looks like a bodybuilder.
I remember from way back in the day, he was my inspiration for cooking. Like yes. I actually loved cooking because he loves eating.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I don't get upset about it at all.
I'm so excited about, if you make the bit huge batch of muffins, he is all about it. It's fun to feed people who are really hungry. And
yes, it is.
To eat the young people, well, he's not a teenager anymore. He's a young adult. How long would you say food could be left in the freezer? Do you have something you look at? Can you just leave it indefinitely? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if I'm ever concerned, I do just give my mom a call. She is the expert on how long things can last, just that motherly wisdom. But whenever I can't get a hold of her, I have used a chart. I think Good Housekeeping, they have on their website a chart that's broken down by different categories, meat and veggies, fruit, etc. And it'll give you an estimate time frame of how long things can last. I'd say on average things last 3 to 6 months. But that's just when the quality starts to break down. If you can leave it in there a little bit longer if it will stay in there. Most of the time it gets pulled out and eaten in my house. Things do last very long, especially if you have a deep freezer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say indefinitely. Like you said, I would check the dates and rotate things. And then also the quicker you share them or eat them, the better quality you're going to have. Mm-hmm. Well, I will post some of our favorite things that we talked about. We mentioned so many ideas that I won't post everything, but some of the key things we talked about, I'll put a link or put a product link. So just check out her blog post on comeoverfordinner.com. There will also be some recipes that she mentioned in the index, and the full star chopper is going to be on the shop page. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Serena, so much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure.
Until next time, bye.